Yeah, so we have created it in a playlist form, right? I have not created a separate channel for it. The link is already available in the Google Classroom, right? You can access it.
Okay, sir.
So I hope you are accessing this Google Classroom materials. Yesterday we have posted the classroom notes and a link for the that YouTube playlist where we have uploaded the video. So similarly, we will be repeating the same process for remaining or upcoming lectures also. And this is for your reference, future reference. So yeah, so today's discussion is primarily based on two things. First thing is basically because we have got a basic idea about the term data. Now the next term is what if we have collection of data, right? And what if we have collection of data and there is need of processing, right? So that's why it is called concept of information. And the next thing is what is the concept, beyond information. So there are two next level of detailings which are referred as knowledge and wisdom. So there is this term called DIKW framework, which is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So it is assumed that in the entire world of internet, at least in the internet concern, whatever details are available, it could be in one form. Out of these four forms, any data, any detail which is available in the internet, it could be in one stage. It will be data, or it may be information, it may be a knowledge piece, it may be the uh, wisdom form of detail, right? So this is something very, very abstract concept. And as far as the computer science student, it is very important to have this basic idea that, okay, if something is given to you, can you identify the possible type of it, right? So what is the current form of it? Is it the data? Is it information? Is it knowledge, or is it wisdom? Right. So we have partially touched upon this part in previous semester also. Uh, this is a very elementary concept, but it is very important in some senses, right? So today we will be now going one step ahead from the previous discussion, and we will try to understand what if we have more than one data objects, right? So suppose I wanted to collect the detail about the students in this class. So right now I have a roll list in front of me where your roll number and your name is given. That's it. Only two details I have which are related to you. Maybe section name. What are the other details and what is the significance of these details, right? So whenever we have more than one data objects and there is more than one detail about object, so then you have a task to organize it. So the after having the data, to it is very important to manage it. So when I say manage, it means three things, right? So let me put it: manage. So within manage, these are the three primary or primarily important tasks, right? So first is naturally its collection. It is collection, right? How you are collecting the data, right? Collecting or organizing, basically. Sometimes it comes under the organization also. The next task is storing. So after uh, collecting the data or maybe data details, you will be going for some kind of compatible storage, right? And once the data is stored in some storage device or maybe storage system, uh, the last thing is probably related to this is something related to the user query, right? So once the data is stored into some system, in the future when the user wants to access the data, how you are going to provide it to the user, right? So that is what called representation or represented, right? So we have to talk about these three things. These three tasks, three different tasks are often referred as a data management, right? Data management. So this term called data management is very important because based on this only people say database management system, right? Which is called DBMS, which is a software actually. So any software will be doing these three tasks only. So it could be Oracle or it could be any DBMS software. So the objective of this whole course and or maybe objective of a DBMS software is to deal with these three tasks: how data is collected, how data could be stored, and what could be the form of representation of the same data in the case of user interaction, right? So let's open these three layers or these three tasks, right, one by one. So when we say you are trying to collect the data, right? So whenever we are collecting the data, it is always with respect to similar data. You cannot have the student detail and some passenger detail in one single database table, right? So whenever we say we are collecting the data, it is always related to the similar data object. It is always, and it is kind of compulsory also, that whenever you are collecting a data, it should be of similar type, like similar data objects, like maybe a students, uh, right? Students, maybe person, maybe passenger, maybe citizen, right? Something like that. So in one database, you could have one type of data objects. That's what I wanted to say here, right? You cannot mix the student detail with faculty details, right? So that's what the purpose is, to understand the collection. So when we say data collection, it is to identify the similar objects, and when we when we collect all these similar data objects, next task is to identify their similar feature, and these feature will be created in the database, which is often referred as a attribute also. Attributes like name, like whenever we are collecting the student details, the name is the first thing which is common. Then we have date of birth, then their email id, then phone number. So after collecting the similar data objects, next task next task is to identify the possible similar details which can be captured, right? So similar properties or similar feature, you can say, or sometimes in a basic way it is called attributes, right? So that's the part of data collection, right? So we are discussing data collection, or how it is collected, how it is organized, right? Next thing is basically when we identify these features or properties or attributes, it is very important to see that the range and the domain of the possible values in these feature, right? At least have some idea about the possible values which will be coming in these columns. So in the name column, you should have idea ki first name, last name, and middle name hoga. Similarly, in the DOB, you should always have idea that for each and a student, I will be capturing the date of birth, not like date of birth with time, right? So only date of birth is required. So maybe month, year, and the day, but it is not possible that you are capturing the DOB, date, month, year, and time. So you should always careful about this thing, right? So after capturing these or identifying the similar feature, next thing you should be concerned about कि इन कॉलम्स एंड फीचर्स में जो वैल्यूज आएंगी फ्यूचर में, उनकी रेंज या डोमेन क्या होगी. दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? And based on these two, this feature only, you will be selecting a proper data type of the column. Like in the any programming language, we used to identify the variables data type. Similarly, in the database also, whenever we identify a feature, the next task is to identify the most appropriate data type, right? Integer होगा या variable होगा. So once you got that idea, you should always concern कि इसकी range क्या होगी. Domain type is one part, range क्या होगी, values की range क्या होगी, right? After this, naturally you will be gathering these features, these range domain things, which is again important aspect of data collection. Next thing is to identify that what is the type of data we are gathering. It is structured or unstructured, right? Because based on this definition, structured and unstructured, you can precisely say whatever data you have collected may be called as database or may be called as a data set, right? So nowadays we are hearing lot more about this term data set, right? And in initially or in the traditional books, it is often referred as a database also. So database is simply, it is nothing, it is a collection of. So whenever a definition is posed to you, or maybe this question is asked to you, that what is database? It is a collection of similar details of a similar data objects, right? So sometimes it is called like this, and sometimes it is called like A database is a collection of similar details of a similar data, something like that, right? So it is very important. So similar details is important, and similar data objects both are very critical to the definition, right? So this is primarily, and that's how we are understanding this definition of database, right? And database and data sets are somehow equivalent terms. The difference is only in this part, that for structured data collection, we often use this term database, and whenever we say it is a unstructured type of data which we have collected, it is referred as a data set, right? Because it is having some sort of features, some sort of values which are not of nature structured. That's why it is called data set, something like that, right? So this is primarily related to the data collection. When we collect the data, you should always look for the property. You will always concerned about the domain and range of the values in the possible attributes. Then you should be having this clear idea that whatever data you have collected, what is the nature? Is it a database or is it a data set, right? And it is coming from the data content type. Next thing is, once you collected all these database or maybe data set, next thing is to understand that what is the possible arrangements for storing this data, what is the storage device I have, and what is the next different things, different tasks I should be doing, right? So all the gathered data, so the first task is to transform it. So once you collect all the data, you should have this idea at this point that whatever data we are looking at, when we are going to store this data into the servers or into the storage device, the data needs to be transformed, right? So जिस फॉर्म में हमें दिखता है, लाइक अभी जो डिटेल आपको इस वर्ड फाइल में दिख रही है, ये जब सिस्टम में सेव होगा इस फॉर्म में नहीं रहेंगी डिटेल्स. These details will be transformed, right? And this transformation is to basically achieve the most, I mean, best or maybe optimal space utilization in the bottom, in the storage level. So the very first thing, so this transformation we are not going to do. This is what the system will be doing, right? So the gathered data which we have collected, right, for some purpose will be transformed into a compatible form, right? And this will be done by your machine or maybe system or maybe database system, which we will be discussing in upcoming classes, right? So when this data will be transformed, there will be a appropriate data structure available in the storage level, right? We have nothing to do with this. For each storage device, there is a data structure which is available. Like for your laptop device, there is a storage device available in your system, your hard drive. There is a specific data structure configured into this particular hard drive, and similarly for the pen drive, similarly for the servers. So for each different types of storage device, we have, or the manufacturer have already customized it with a specific data structure, right? So whatever data we have gathered, it will be transformed and it will be going into these structures, right? So it is something, it is hard coded. So this data structure in the storage devices is already a hard coded part. We cannot change it, right? So even when we form or maybe you can, sometimes it is called formatted. So even we formate a device, see this formation or formatting of a storage device will not change this data structure, right? Similarly, so whenever, because this storing or storage part is having this feeling that data will be going into a certain or on a specific area of storage, right? So suppose this Excel file or this Word file will be saved in my system. This file will be going into a particular portion of a storage, a portion of a hard drive, right? So there is this need of mapping. So each and every data object, each and every data objects will be mapped to a specific physical store. So within hard drive, within server, within USB, this one single data object like Word file or maybe image or video will be going to one specific portion of it. And there is this need of mapping, right? So to map a particular data object, you need some scheme. So this is something like hashing scheme index. So there are various schemes available for that. So these obvious, this storage part and all the related things like data structure and mapping scheme and all other things like advanced feature we will be discussing, these all things will be managed by the manufacturer of the, because this part is entirely related to the hardware part. So there is this role of hard drive, there is this role of servers. So this part will be entirely managed or maybe hard coded by the manufacturer of the device, right? So we are just having a mention of these things so that we have some idea that okay, in our database when we talk about storage level, and so these things are happening within the storage level when we push the data on the servers or push the data in the storage level, right? So after getting into the mapping scheme, the data will be naturally stored on a particular portion, right? So there are various advanced features, advanced functionalities has been done on the database level. These things are primarily done by a specific type of user of database who is called DBA, right? DBA is a user actually, DBA user. So he will be performing these tasks on the database. Naturally, purpose is to improve the performance of database, right? Because it is very clear that for the success of any software or for success of any website, the response of database is the critical. It is the bottleneck, right? If your database server is not responding, entire system will fail, right? Because in modern days we are having some efficient networking services. So maybe in early 90s network was the problem, but nowadays we cannot claim that network is slow, something like that. Most of the cases it is the data server which is not responding to the data request, which is not responding to the user interaction for the services, right? So to take care of these kind of issues, there are various tasks or there are various advanced or high end tasks which needs to be performed by DBA, right? So DBA is a person who is the most privileged user of the data. So he will be performing the tasks like partitioning the database, taking the backup and recovery of the database, archiving it, or taking snapshot of the data at the end of the day, something like that. So there are various tasks. We will be discussing about all these things in the last portion of this syllabus, right? How these things are happening, what is the different task or maybe processes, how they are going to be implemented. So we will talk about all these things in detail, right? So first two steps like collecting the data, storing the data into it is a naturally traditional part or traditional task. Last thing which is important is that how the data will be given back to the user, right? So because eventually when we have the data in servers in our hard drives, naturally we are preparing this data or organizing the data for some purpose. So in the future when user raise a user request or any query or any sort of search onto the database, the data will be retrieved, right? So you will be submitting a simple your roll number and your email address to get your results, or maybe to get your DMC, something like that. So whenever you pose a request, a data or maybe data objects will be retrieved, right? Will be retrieved, and these retrieved data objects will be again transformed into a readable form. That's very essential, because whatever data we have kept in the storage level or at the storage level, it is not in the readable form. If you read the data which is available in the hard drives, you cannot comprehend anything, right? It looks like it's a garbage. So that's why it is very important to get the transformation or perform the transformation on the data which is available in the storage device. So after getting the data in readable form, you can easily understood that this is my result, this is my grade, this is my score, this is my ticket number, this is my PNR number, something like that, right? So in each case, whether it is your simple college management system or it is IRCTC system or SBI system, so each and every place they are having servers, each and every place they are going to perform these transformation, right? Even if you go to the ATM, they are, whenever you opt for some service, whenever you perform some interaction with the ATM services, there is this interaction or communication or conversation between you and the SBI server happens through terminals, right? So for each action or for each operation, there is this transformation is being performed. That's very important. Transformation, right? Transformation of the data. So whenever you have some data, whenever this data is available to you in the readable form, there could be various ways of showing the data to you, showing the data to a user, right? So most of the cases it is a tabular view. So most of the cases the data is appearing in you uh, to you in the form of tables, right? Like if you look for your results, it will usually appears in some sort of tables. There is column is placed on the top, and for each column the values are given to you, right? Sometimes it appears in the form of list also, where the information object or maybe data objects are listed within, right? Sometimes it appears as a bag of words, right? Sometimes it is appear as a graphs also. For some user, the data. So like what this is what happens in the case of analytics. So whenever we perform some sort of analytics on the data will be appearing in the form of graphs, right? So the graph is another way of giving the data in a readable form. Sometimes it is simply grouped. So like in case of there are various representation being used nowadays where the data is appearing in the form of keywords, and the size of keyword is indicating its presence, right? So there the words, the data objects are clubbed into some sort of cluster or some sort of grouped arrangement, and the size of keyword is showing something else, right? So there are various ways of showing the data to the user. So it is closely related to the system, right? Because it is the system transformation service or data representation service which makes it possible to achieve these way of looking at the data, right? So with this, I can say the data or maybe other things related to the data are partially discussed. Few things we will be discussing in the upcoming lectures in details, right? How to achieve this, how to implement this. So each and everything will be discussed in details. Now with this discussion, let's go to the next level, which is referred as information, right? So information is primarily nothing. It is the next level of detail. So for the first level of detail about anything is primarily called data. And if we apply something onto this data, like yesterday we have taken an example that by after collecting all details about you, institute used to give you a roll number, right? So we have collected all the details about a student and submits into the system, and system has assigned or generated a roll number to you, right? So on the behalf of all these 20-30 details, now you have a simple small 6 or 8 digit value which is useful, which is compact, which is abstract, and which identifies you, right? Prior to this position, there are 20-30 details about you which are being used to identify you in a crowd of 120 or 140. But now by simply calling this roll number, by simply calling your passport number, by simply calling by your Aadhaar ID, I can call you, right? So this is the advantage of simple processing. So by applying a simple processing on the set of data details, right, you can get a simple abstract detail about you, right? So we have two options. Either we can call these 20 details to call you, to identify you, or I can use simply one simple roll number or passport number to identify you, right? And this is by achieved by a very basic levels of processing, right? So that's what is called processed data is referred as information. So the most abstract definition is processed data is information, right? Processed data. So you need to identify what is the processing we apply, what is the processing we should apply to achieve information, right? So the usual or the very common way of processing is transformation, right? So transformation means n number of details about a data object are submitted to the system, and system has generated a basic or small size details, right? And when you generate this small size detail, the detail in this small size or information object are coming from one of your, so it's like having a your enrollment number where your DOB value is being used, your name value is being used, your pin code is being used, something like that. That's one unconventional way. uh, so transformation is one of the basic approach or basic processing through which information is achieved, right? That's the basic way. You can always have some example where we can achieve. So sometimes it is, let me enrollment number in some cases, but it is now obsolete. There is no website or there is no platform which is following this approach, because there is a possibility of data theft. By using by reading the enrollment number, they might develop some data or recreate your data. So it was the usual, or maybe in the early days approach, where utilizing the 20-30 details for getting a enroll number was the traditional way, was the key. But nowadays we are not having this way. We are having some sort of abstraction or data abstraction way, right? So in this case of abstraction, on this case of data abstraction approach, what we do, in our systems, we provide the details and system will provide a new abstract piece of information to you, right? And this roll number thing is nothing to do with any data stored about you, right? You cannot recreate any detail about you by reading into the roll number. Similarly with the passport number, similarly with the UID. So this is something, a new thing, and this is primarily called as abstraction. And in abstraction, it is referred as a data abstraction, particularly because in the abstraction we have two way of doing it. It is data abstraction or maybe procedural abstraction. So procedural abstraction is a different thing. We will not be talking about this. It is closely related to the operating system thing. There might be some course to you which is called operating system. There you will read about this thing, a lot more concepts related to this, right? So with this, naturally, transformation was the first way of doing it, first way of processing on the data to achieve information. Then we have, nowadays we are having abstraction, and addition to this, there is concept called hiding, which is maybe data hiding, or maybe sometimes it is called itself is the information hiding, right? So there are these two concepts. You can always read about these things. These things are very important. These things are very close to each other. Sometimes it is called that this abstraction and hiding are same, but these two concepts are not same. These two concepts are there for different purpose. The purpose is different, right? Naturally, the first purpose is to separate the details. So roll number is different detail, and these 20 details about you are different. So we are creating a layer in between, right? So that any individual who is accessing a roll number cannot read about these things, something like that. So in both cases, data or information hiding and abstraction, conceptually they are similar, right? Because they are trying to create a layer, but when you implement it, both are different concepts, right? So there are these concepts called hiding, information hiding, and data hiding. There is a concept called refinement. So there are various concepts through which you can generate the information, right? Even you can say most of the basic processing systems, processing algorithms are achieving some sort of information as outcome, right? Okay, so with this, there is this very specific and related question, which is that why information is generated, right? That is the first question you should have clarity upon. So based on these discussion on these three, four points, you can easily answer this question, that why information is gathered. Second thing, what is the property of information object? Like in the yesterday class, we have discussed the property of data object could be it is unprocessed, it is not having any processing attached to it, and it could be a atomic value. It cannot be decomposed further. That's the few property of the data object. Similarly, if you have information object, what could be the property? So first property is that it is a processed data. Second thing could be whenever we process a data and derive it to in the form of information, it will be attached with some sort of time limit, and so this is called plainly called geo-temporal limitations. Like your roll number is valid for maybe for 4 years, and it is valid or it is applicable within the college boundary, something like that. So whenever we are generating information, it will be having these two validity, right? Time and geographical limitation. You cannot use your Aadhaar ID to identify yourself in the different country. So your Aadhaar ID is applicable maybe for the entire life, but for a specific country. Similarly, with your roll number, it is applicable for 4 years and it is only valid in the range of institute, right? So whenever so these are the basic examples. So whenever you process a data to generate information, it will always have these two validations, temporal and geographical, right? So with this, now let's see on a specific diagram to have a more clarity upon it. So let me put it in this way. So yeah, so I think it is now perfectly uh, visible to you. So this is what a typical structure we are talking about. So we begin with in usual settings, we begin with the data. Actually, in the, you can see the very first quadrant, uh, not second, the very first and the leftmost, this data quadrant is placed. So in the data quadrant, we used to capture the real world requirements, and whatever requirements we have, out of these requirements, we extract the data requirements or data objects and collect them, right? So this is what collection means. So collecting requires some sort of data processing, right? So this is what you are simply extracting or taking out the similar objects. This is what simply referred as a data processing. Once you have all the similar objects with you with the similar property, you can organize them into a structure, into a collection, which is often referred as a database. So you can see after getting the data modeling process. So data modeling means simply organizing the data. You are organizing the data. So suppose I have collected the 120 student details and their respective features. So I can organize some, I will simply perform a data modeling and collect all these details about these 120 students and organize them into a structured organization. So simply the objective of this first quadrant where data is placed, objects are gathered, the objective is to achieve or to implement a syntax, right? So syntax means sometimes in a basic way it is referred as a adding a structure, right? So that's what the typical meaning also. So by performing basic data processing and modeling, you can achieve a organized way database, organized way of collection of data into form of database. So in this first quadrant, we are simply adding syntax. After this, if you are interested to process this data which is available in the database, so if you want to process it to perform something, naturally you will be adding something into this data, or you may be achieving new details on after processing on this, right? And then then this second quadrant, right most on the top, right one in the top, right? So you can read your information quadrant. There you can read it is simply adding the semantics. So semantic means something additional, which in the form of meaning, like either you are adding in the form of annotation, adding some metadata, adding some, by processing abstraction. So whenever we apply some processing onto this data collected in a structured way, you will get the information object, right? So you can have some idea about this thing, that so these initially we have these circles, dotted blue objects which are referred as a data object. Now you have information objects, and there is this relationship between the different information objects, right? So this is what it is called information processing. So in the first quadrant we have data processing, where we have performed some basic tasks, and the second quadrant, when we are trying to achieve some information object, we are applying some basic information processing tasks, right? So that these details will be abstracted, these details will be in the more refined form, right? uh, After getting the information, there is this third quadrant and fourth quadrant. So third quadrant is slightly important, though I'm not clear about the fourth quadrant, because fourth quadrant is one of the complex area which is not which is least explored. There are few people in the world who can claim that I have the wisdom, I have gained the wisdom, I have developed algorithm which can derive the wisdom, right? So it is something, it is not a scope of this discussion, right? The scope of this course. So the next quadrant, which is referred as the knowledge, right? So knowledge is, you can correlate with this. Knowledge is something, whenever we have information object, if you are applying this information objects for some purpose. Like if I am using your Aadhaar card to, if I am using your Aadhaar card to list uh, for the possible beneficiary of vaccination, right? So we are applying your Aadhaar ID to get it identified that you are eligible for it, you are well equipped for it, you are where is what is their location. So whenever we use the information object for some purpose, some for a particular application, then that particular achieved output becomes a knowledge, right? So the very basic example of this theory quadrant is your classroom situation, right? So whenever we are having discussion, I'm sharing some notes to you, you are noting some inputs on your notebook. So these all these things which you are gathering on your notebooks are often called information, right? Whatever content I am delivering to you, it is data. I am pushing a lot of notes to you. I am narrating something, discussing some details via this online setting. These things, whichever I am showing to you or sharing to you, it is in the form of data. And whatever content you have written on your notebook, whatever content you have gathered on your mind, it is in the form of information. And at the end of this semester, you will be responding or you will be writing the answers for a few questions. So whatever content you are writing on the answer scripts is or may be referred as a knowledge, right? Because there you are applying the information you have collected to respond to a question, right? That question is your context. So you can read here in the third quadrant, knowledge representation, you are applying the contextual semantics. So you are so there is this scenario given to you, these questions are scenario, and to answer these questions you are writing something on the notebook. So if you correlate, so your answers on the script and whatever notes, whatever content I'm sharing, so there is this two level of processing. One is data to information, and then there is information to knowledge. So this is what and maybe the basic way of understanding these three levels of detail. And I don't know how you are going to process this knowledge or utilize this knowledge to achieve wisdom. That's why it is very difficult to understand, right? That's why it is difficult to correlate that which system is applying what kind of processing, right, to achieve the wisdom. And if you raise the question, sir, where is machine learning? So at this knowledge level, most of the machine learning algorithms are working, right? So we are training the machine learning models or algorithm to achieve some task, right? So most of the AI, machine learning, deep learning, all these things are based on this logic, where we are training a system based on supplied knowledge, based on given knowledge to it, and we are expecting a machine to deliver the wisdom, right? This fourth quadrant, which is open, which is vague, right? So that's it for the today's discussion. And now if you have anything to raise, you can let me know. Yes, please. So we have maybe a few minutes to share. So if you have any question, you just let me know.
So,
Yes.
so